Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks so much to those of you who are watching and joining on Facebook. I'm Ann Beeson, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Public Policy Priorities. At CPPP, we believe in a Texas that gives people of all backgrounds the chance to reach their full potential. And we think what that means is that every Texan should be able to be healthy, well-educated, and financially secure. Local democracy, the ability of locally elected public officials to craft policies that fit the needs of their communities, is critical to achieving our vision for Texas, for our state. We are very passionate about credible data at CPPP, and everything we do starts with credible data. And that's why we're so excited to have all of this rich new data that we're about to share from today's poll. In a moment, we're going to hear from CPPP Legislative and Policy Director Luis Figueroa, who is tracking some good and some dangerous bills related to local democracy during this legislative session. We're also going to hear from Candice Quarles, two over on my right, a wonderful city council member from DeSoto, the town of DeSoto, near my hometown of Dallas. And we're delighted that Candice is able to join us to discuss the importance of local decision making. And then we're going to hear from Mike Baselice, right here to my right, of Baselice Associates, who we commissioned to conduct this groundbreaking statewide poll. We're thrilled to partner with Mike, a very well-respected Republican pollster, on a survey of Democrats, Republicans, and independents across the state. CPPP is, and always has been, a nonpartisan, independent organization, and we will work with anyone ready to improve conditions in this state for hardworking Texans and their families. As you'll hear, our poll demonstrates the statewide popularity of policies that support working families. Specifically, we took a look at how Texans feel about wages, paid sick leave, and local government's ability to raise the revenue that they need. Across the country, you have hopefully heard that cities and counties are raising wages to ensure that hardworking families can move into the middle class. Well, unfortunately, here in Texas, our state is blocking our own cities and counties from doing that same thing for Texans. Communities nationwide are also expanding access to paid sick days so that workers do not have to choose between economic security and taking time off from work when they're sick. Unfortunately, again, some of our state leaders want to block the efforts of our local communities to provide access to paid sick leave. And 4.3 million Texas workers, or 40% of the total workforce, lack access currently to paid sick leave. Finally, cities and counties need to be able to raise funds locally to pay for libraries, parks, police, fire, paramedics, and everything else we count on when we live in our communities and our towns. But misguided proposals here at the Capitol, like SB2 and HB2, suggest that state leaders don't trust Texans to make the best decisions for our own communities. Today's poll results should reinforce our commitment to local decision making and to local democracy. Thank you so much for being with us, and I'm now going to hand it over to Luis Figueroa.
Thank you very much.
How to do this.
Thank you very much. So, CPPP is very concerned that the accelerated use of preemption in Texas threatens the fundamental ability of cities to act in their unique views, values, and needs of their communities. Texas cities have become a critical source of innovation across a wide array of policies to advance health, inclusion, equitable opportunities, and social justice. So I want to give you just an indication of where things are here at the legislature and some of the issues that we are concerned about. There are currently about 25 bills at last count related to state interference filed in the House and Senate. There are a wide ranging of bills from everything from health implications to tax set to even ordinances related to how animals and other issues are addressed. So for Texas to progress, cities, counties, and towns must remain hubs of innovation and solution testing. So I want to give you a few samples of some of the bills that are out there. So a House Bill 22232 is specifically related to paid sick day preemption, but the one that we are most concerned about, Senate Bill 15 and HB 1654, are sometimes referred to as the omnibus state interference bills. Sometimes we refer to them as the Death Star bill because they not only just affect paid sick policy, they affect the entire relationship between workers and employers and preempt cities from being able to address any of those issues across the board on a wide range of issues. And so there's a counterpart to that bill, also Senate Bill 762. In addition, CPPP has been monitoring the legislation HB2 and SB2, which concern the local tax rates and the ability of cities to set their own tax rates without having to hold an election every time they go above 2.5%. There are also some proactive bills. They're moving the state in a little bit more positive direction. So today, there was an announcement that Senate Bill 1826 and House Bill 3728 by Senator Menendez and Representative Bernal have filed a statewide paid sick days raise for a floor for all Texas workers without restricting local government ability to address their local needs. Similarly, Senate Bill 161 and House Bill 328 by Lena Ortega remove state interference on local minimum wage increases. So where do things stand right now? Senate Bill 15 is on the intent calendar on the Senate. It'll be eligible for debate next week, and there may be a debate going on in the Senate related to this across-the-board state interference on all things related to employer-worker relations. House Bill 1654, the counterpart, has been referred to the House State Affairs Committee. House Bill 2 is pending in House and Ways Means Committee. And Senate Bill 2 has already passed out of committee in the Senate, but is stalled on the Senate floor over what many senators have expressed concerns over local control. So we are obviously at a precipice now. Bills are starting to move very quickly. The discussions are happening on the committees and in the floor, and now is the time for action. So we believe this poll is essential for discourse and for representative democracy because it informs what people are truly feeling in their home communities, where they are on these issues. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to our next speaker to really get into the heart of the matter. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm honored to be here today as CPPP releases this new statewide poll. My name is Candice Quarles. I'm a councilwoman in DeSoto, a suburb of Dallas. And I know how important it is for local government to be able to pass legislation that supports its constituents. This poll by Baselice Associates puts numbers behind what I've already learned from my constituents. As a working mother, I stand with 3/4 of Texans who believe private and public employers should be required to provide paid sick leave for their employees. As a councilwoman, I know if we, the leaders, and the legislators of Texas are to support the modern workforce, we must make access to a living wage and paid sick leave mandatory. We've seen in San Antonio and Austin pass ordinances to provide paid sick leave to their residents, laws that the Texas Senate may overrule, and making local leaders unable to support the hardworking people of those cities. As the state Senate prepares to debate legislation that would ban San Antonio, Austin, and all of Texas cities from adopting policies that would provide a strong economy for hardworking Texans, I and 81% of Texans, Republicans and Democrats alike, are concerned that the state Senate is out of touch with the desires of the people that they serve and the residents of Texas. Baselice Associates has done the work. Texans will support legislators who support a community's ability to act in the best interest of their residents. On voting day, Texans will support candidates who support strong local economies. And why wouldn't they? Strong local economies create strong state economies. It's time for Texas, the second most populated state in America, to continue to be the innovative leader it has always been. It's time for Texas to increase minimum wage, empower local governments to build strong economies, and give paid sick leave to all hardworking Texans. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Candice, and for your remarks. And now we're going to hear the numbers from Mike.
Thank you very much. I'm Mike Baselice of Baselice Associates, and my firm conducted this survey of 801 voters across the state of Texas on February 13th through 19th. If you look at some of the crosstabs in the data, we break up the results by major media market or media market clusters. We put all the West Texas markets together, the 3 in East Texas together. The 2 largest are the Dallas-Fort Worth and the Houston media markets, and they make up the majority of the vote. or slight majority of the vote in the state. I put El Paso and San Antonio, South Texas together because demographically they're more similar than dissimilar. Another way that we can look at this data is by what I classify urban, suburban versus rural counties. There are 13 counties there in gold that make up the urban, suburban counties, and that's about 3 out of 5 voters. The other 241 counties in the state in green make up the other 2 out of 5 voters. Demographically, one of the things I'm a stickler for are how representative is the sample in the state, and Texas is about 9 points more Republican than Democratic in terms of its base vote. In terms of its race, we look at an ethnicity. The state is 20% Hispanic, 13% African American. That's not population. That's not adult population. These are the voters who vote, and that's what we're representing here. And the ages are broken out as well. One of the key questions we asked is this question on allowing paid sick leave. We gave very little information so that the voter would have just so much in order to answer the question, you favor or oppose allowing cities and counties to establish paid sick day requirements for local governments and for businesses. 3/4, as the Councilwoman said, 3/4 of Texas voters favor allowing cities and counties to establish paid sick day requirements. 22% are opposed. When we break out this data by some of the subgroups, we find that 64% of males, but 82% of females favor this, as do 90% of Democrats, 74% of independents, and 61% of Republicans. We also asked if respondents favor or oppose a statewide law that limits the ability of cities, counties, and school districts to increase its property tax by more than 2.5% a year to pay for police, fire, and other public services. This one was split. 47% favored and 47% opposed the statewide law that limits the ability for cities to tax this way. When we look at, but before I go there, I do want to share one other thing. Some of the other questions that we asked in the survey, we asked respondents if they thought that local governments should have the ability to pass or not have the ability to pass certain taxes, such as should local governments be able to set the tax rate to support police, fire, and paramedics. 78% of Texans said yes, local governments should have that ability. 79% believe that local governments should have the ability to set local tax rates to provide for roads, parks, and libraries. And 3/4 support local governments having the ability to set local tax rates to support local schools in their community. We asked about the minimum wage as well. We explained that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 was for 29 states have raised that minimum wage above that. But Texas has not raised its minimum wage above the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour, and that the state law currently prevents local communities from raising the minimum wage. We asked then, do you favor or oppose allowing cities in Texas to increase their local minimum wage above $7.25 per hour? And 2/3 of Texas voters favor this. Males were 59% support, females 74%. Female Republicans were at 52%. Then it goes to 81% for female independents and 93% for female Democrat voters. We asked a general question. We asked respondents if they agreed or disagreed with this statement. Local governments are better connected to the community and should be allowed to pass policies that reflect their community's needs and values. 87% agree with this particular statement. Only 11% disagreed. Very little difference here between Republicans and Democrats and independents. As 85% of Republicans, 86% of independents, 90% of Democrats agree with this statement. And in between, there was no difference between urban, suburban versus rural, with 87% of the urban, suburban voters and 86% of rural voters agreeing with this statement. We also asked, do you agree or disagree that local governments pass local ordinances that create strong local economies which contribute to a strong state economy? And here we see 5 out of 6 voters agree with this. Demographically, no difference between Republicans and Democrats at 82% each, and 86% of independents agreeing with this. 85% of those in the rural parts of the state and 82% of the voters in urban suburban counties agree with this as well. We also asked a viewpoint question. Sometimes these are called Smith-Jones questions, or other people say questions. 69% thought that this viewpoint came closest to their own. What works for people in a large city may not work for people in a small town in the same state. Local government exists to create laws that most accurately reflect the unique views, values, and needs of the people who live there. 1/3 as many chose this viewpoint. When local governments each pass their own laws and policies, it creates a patchwork of laws across the state, which creates confusion and more red tape and paperwork for businesses that state officials should stop. Very little indecision on this. Republicans, independents, and Democrats in large majorities share the viewpoint that local governments exist to create laws that most accurately reflect their unique needs, values. These are a few other questions that we asked, and here are the answers to them. What we did here is, for each of them, we wanted the respondent to indicate whether each bothered them a great deal, some, not too much, or not at all. And you can see that in each case, a majority of respondents in the state are bothered at least somewhat, or we say a great deal. In conclusion, there's broad support across Texas voters for local governments and local control. This support crosses all political parties and among rural and urban suburban voters. Large majority of voters, 3/4 of them, support allowing local governments to establish paid sick leave requirements. 52% strongly support this. Even when we broke out this information by political party, well over a majority of each partisan subgroup was supportive. And overall, voters were split on local control over property tax. 47% opposed and 47% favor, with 7% unsure, depends, about a statewide law that limits local governments to increase property tax by more than 2.5% a year. Opposition increases slightly in the East and West Texas communities at 57% and 52% among rural Republicans and voters 55 years of age or older. Ann?
Thank you so much, Mike, and thanks again, everyone, for being here and for being with us on Facebook. I'm Ann Beeson. I lead the Center for Public Policy Priorities, and we're here. Thank you, Mike. Sorry about that, folks. I'm Ann Beeson with the Center for Public Policy Priorities. We're here discussing the results of a new statewide poll about very strong support for local democracy and the ability of local governments to pass and support laws that are in the best needs of their communities. The poll was conducted by Baselice Associates, and we'd love to answer any questions you all have out here in the live audience or online on Facebook.
I want to recap just a few of the top highlights or the things that y'all found most.
Yeah, sure thing. Actually, Mike, I was wondering, one of the things that came out was there's been some additional polling that we've seen related to local tax rates. And I believe you pointed out that the framing of the question matters sometimes. And so when you put a question of what voters should decide, can you go in a little bit of like why there's differences in polling?
Oh, absolutely. I think I got asked this question. I was doing a survey on billboards, and Mayor Lanier back in Houston had me in front of the city council, and he asked the very question. How the question that you worded in the survey make a difference? Absolutely, it makes a difference. Here we see when we talk about should the local communities have the, do you favor or oppose local communities being able to, or would you favor or oppose a statewide law that would limit local communities to be able to increase that property tax by 2.5% per year? That is a different question than what we're seeing in some other polls. Some other polls just ask, do you want to limit your property tax increases? And that's a different question and a different set of responses than limiting local government's ability to decide for themselves what that tax should be. Because we saw enough of the other questions and answers that indicate, and while we understand that there is concern about affordability and property tax as a main source of revenue for many parts of the state, locally and statewide, that particularly when it comes to funding of schools, that a large majority of voters want that local control to be in the hands of their locally elected officials.
Thank you for that. I think that's one of the things we're seeing around the Capitol is some confusion about the differences in the polling. So I think that that clears up a lot of that confusion. And I guess one of the other things I wanted to mention is there's a whole range of preemption issues or state interference issues. And so each of them are going to have a little bit different dynamic, but I wanted to highlight one of the things you pointed out was which one is closest to your viewpoint, which is that when given the choice about whether a patchwork is closer to their viewpoint or whether it was local communities. And so could we say that that's kind of the general feeling across the board, or in other words, even though there's going to be differences within each issue, the general feeling is?
Oh yeah, here almost 7 out of 10 voters believe that local governments exist to take care of their own needs. When you see that regionally and you see that type of response by different partisan subgroups and large majorities, actually the margin of error goes down on something like that. The margin of error when you look at a survey of 3.5% is based on 50% saying yes and 50% saying no. So the margin of error here is somewhere in the 2.5% range. Mm-hmm. That's a very small margin of error when a large majority are agreeing with one viewpoint over another.
Mm-hmm. And then we get into specific issues. The one thing I just wanted to have you maybe reiterate is the overwhelming support for paid sick leave. I was really shocked when I looked at these results that regardless of demographic, region, that it was always well over 50% support. And so I just kind of wanted to reiterate it as, or ask you to kind of go over a little bit on the demographics on the paid sick leave. And just kind of.
I don't think it's lost on anyone here that had children and had anybody be a stay-at-home parent. But I think that's when you look at that crosstab of gender and you see that 82% of females are supportive of letting local governments establish paid sick leave policies, you know where that comes from. I can speak to the point that when we had our first child and I came home from work one day and I think Christine was about 6 weeks old, Julie met me at the door, handed me the baby, and went out to get something to eat. And said she needed some time. She needed some more time and some more help. And everyone needs time and help at different times in the growing of their family, whether it's for a newborn child or helping a loved one, or just needing time off themselves because of a surgery or illness. And that demographic, was almost 20 points higher among females being supportive than males.
Yes, I wanted to add to that. Again, like you said, the demographic, I think it hits home for us. A lot of times, especially I'm a working mom, they could have a dad's number as well, but the first number that the school calls is mom's number. And as a mom, I want to be able to respond and have time off to go and pick up a sick child or, be able to take care of myself. But we know most moms save all their sick time for their kids. But even with some of the things that are happening at the local level, when you talk about a DeSoto versus a Dallas, and we're in the same, and we're in Dallas County, the needs of DeSoto residents are, very different from what they need in Dallas County. They're almost 15 times our size. We're talking about tax rates, property tax rates, and the ability to have, to go to the voters for more than 2.5% increase. If you look at most North Texas cities, most of us have not raised our tax rates, nor have we had the need to. Particularly in DeSoto in the past 6 to 7 years, we have consistently kept the tax rate the same or dropped the tax rate. The issue, as we as local electeds feel, the issue is not the tax rate. We can keep the same tax rate, generate the same revenue that we need. The issue is a lot based on appraisal and the broken system that happens at the appraisal process. And then also that system, the revenue that we generate as cities, the same system works very well for our businesses and being able to challenge the appraisal rate. As local electeds, as we have to sometimes refund revenue because they challenge certain things in their businesses, that impacts all of us. And I think you mentioned it about what we're getting to and what the squeeze is being felt is at the schools. And with that, so as much as our people in Austin might think that they understand what's going on in 7.5, 11.5 in DeSoto, we know best. These are our neighbors. These are our family and friends. This is our communities, our blocks. I haven't seen, a few of my senior electeds in Austin at Albertsons, but my residents will see me at Albertsons and at Kroger's. And if they have an issue about that water bill and that tax rate, they'll certainly let me know about it. This is why we are best fit to decide what's happening in our communities. That's why they elected us, consistently elected us. And then if they'll let us know, trust me, they'll let us know at the council meeting down the street.
The ultimate local control, the power of the ballot box, right?
Exactly. So sometimes I feel like we're talking out both sides when we say overreach when it comes to federal government, and then our same neighbors down 35 in Austin come and do the same thing to us. So I just want to say that we know, and I'm sure I was talking about paid sick leave for moms. Forgot about that, yeah. But we, again, when we're talking about putting things in place to help working families.
But what I loved about the polling was that even men, rural men, which are obviously sometimes more conservative, over 50% support for paid sick leave as well. So I think the men are getting it as too, maybe not the same rate, but it's definitely great.
Are there other questions from out? Yes, sir.
Yes, why is there such a disparity between what people want, for example, what people show, and what the actual rules and laws are? For example, with the minimum wage and increasing paid sick leave?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost is I think it's because we haven't seen this polling data needs to get out more. And I don't think people are understanding what's going on the local level. And I think that sometimes the message is getting lost on the electeds when they hear from only certain special interest groups or one particular group, and they haven't seen a crosstab. They haven't seen the numbers across the state in different regions. So I think it's incumbent upon us, CPPP, and other organizations and the local officials to really start educating our legislators about what's really at heart among the real people in Texas.
Well, I was just going to jump in and say, just to build on what Louise said, just to say, unfortunately, we have too many elected officials and too many special interest groups who are holding, these ideas that they have contrary to the facts. In other words, they're making decisions and they're pushing policies that are not based on the data. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, unfortunately, about the impact of various laws. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what happens, is that they're basically having a knee-jerk reaction against something like raising the minimum wage without really looking at the data and seeing not only this kind of data that shows how voters really feel about it and their own constituents, the people that elected them to represent them, but also information about the impact of laws like that.
Did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I wanted to talk about, we talked about those police and firefighters and being able to provide those same services to the city. The service of police and fire is corely one of the unique things that only local is going to have control over, and maybe county in some jurisdictions. So that's going to greatly impact services. If one of the ways the question is framed, I think, do you want to have to go to the voters for more than a 2.5% increase? Favor or oppose, okay, but then when you're talking about implications of no, I do not, or yes, I do, that impacts police and fire and some of the things that we provide that, maybe the average voter might not know. And then at local levels, I can tell you the voter turnout is about 5 to 6%, and that's in a really engaged city. So we're talking about 5 to 6% of the residents are making the decisions about who's in these seats. And then are they truly understanding, in Austin, are they truly understanding whether they are engaged or not? When someone calls 911, there is an expectation that a person's going to show up. And that firefighter better be paramedically trained or EMT trained to handle that situation. So I think the poll is definitely what we've been screaming and echoing, is that these things that our residents expect of us, let us do our job. And when we're talking about state interference and being a true partner in community, we shouldn't be at a combative level where we're fighting against our own state ledge. They should really truly be a partner, but the voice echoing what the local electeds are asking for.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to wrap it up now. I want to thank all of you for joining us and really encourage you all to help us spread the word about these important poll results, and also to spread the word about the importance of local democracy and local control. So thanks so much for being with us, and thank you so much, Councilmember and Mike and Luis, for being part of this conversation. Thanks.